Hey everybody, and welcome to my second of two videos on this, the Canon EOS 500, also known as the EOS Kiss in Japan and the EOS XS in the United States, well, in North America. The first thing we're going to do with this camera is change the battery because it can do nothing whatsoever without the battery in it. So the battery chamber is here, and it takes two CR123 batteries. That's these guys right here. And there's a guide on the battery door that shows how to put them in. This one goes positive terminal up, this one goes negative terminal up, and then you just close the battery door and you've changed the batteries. That's all there is to it. The most expensive thing about this camera today is going to be the batteries, quite honestly. CR123s are not the cheapest batteries for cameras, and if there are rechargeable ones, I don't know that they exist. Next thing we're going to do is talk about mounting and unmounting lenses, which you can do at any time when you're not taking a photo. Simply to unmount a lens, you push the lens release button here, and then you rotate the lens counter or anti-clockwise until the red dot is at the top, and then you just pull it off. Grab your other lens, line up the red index here with the red index here, turn it clockwise until it clicks in place, and you can't unclick it, and now you have loaded or mounted the lens. Let's talk about film loading and unloading here. I'm going to pop this roll in here and hope that I don't completely mess myself up using this roll for future videos. And the film will not advance until you switch to one of the modes, at which point it will now advance to the entire end of the film. So I've got 24 frames left to use with this, and I'm going to show you what it looks like inside here. You can see it's pulled the film all the way out and that it is all the way spooled around the end. So as you shoot your film, it's going to count down as it rewinds the film into the camera, into the cassette rather. So I'm going to go through this and bring it down to about 3 so that I can then salvage my film. Unfortunately, with cameras like this, I cannot open the camera back and show you the operation. You just kind of have to trust me on it. Once you get to the end, then the camera will automatically finish rewinding the film all the way. And you can take it out and put a new roll of film in. However, I need to use this cassette for future videos, so I'm not going to do it the entire way. Then once you have taken it out, once you've taken out your film cassette roll of film after you've used all of it, you can then just pop another one back in and keep shooting, or if you're done for the day, just close this up, turn it to lock, and you're done for the day. Next thing we're going to talk about is how to use the flash. It has a hot shoe only, meaning that if you want to use a flash, you have to mount it on the hot shoe. And any of these modes up here will work with the flash, M, AV, TV, and P. I think ADEP will as well, but have never tried it, so I can't say with certainty. The creative modes down here, some of them disable the flash, some of them don't. So if you want to use a flash, your best bet is going to be to stay up in these modes up here. And that goes for both the pop-up flash right here, as well as a hot shoe mounted flash. Now, some basic tips about flash use, you're going to have to turn your head sideways for this, I apologize, is that when you put a flash on the top of your camera like this is the worst place you can have it. The light's going to go out of the flash, hit your subject, and bounce back to the lens. Your subjects will be waxy and flat looking. It's unflattering, even for waxy and flat looking subjects. So you don't want to do that. Then, so what you can do to counter that is get a flash that has an articulating head so that you can bounce the light off the ceiling and do it and illuminate your subjects that way. The reason for that is that we see everything lit from the top down. The sun is above us, ceiling lights are above us. We're used to always seeing things lit from above. So if something's lit from below, it seems strange to us. So if you want to flatter your subjects when you take pictures of them with a flash, bounce the light off the ceiling. Next thing we're going to do is talk about the mode dial, which is this guy right here. If you want to follow along and get more detail, look up the manual, which there's a link to in the video description, and start on page 55. That has a very useful meatball chart of the functions available in each of these modes and goes into detail about exactly which functions work in every single mode. More detail than I'm going to go into in this video. The functions detailed in that meatball chart include autofocus, drive mode, which is film winding, single shot or continuous, the metering method that the camera uses, as well as the built-in flash and whether it will trigger. So we'll start down here on the bottom and then just go all the way to the top. This first one is sports mode, and it gives you the fastest shutter speed possible with whatever lens, film, and so forth that you're using to freeze motion. This is ideal with 400 ISO film and faster. Close-up mode is this next one, and it will auto-fire the flash for backlit or dark subjects. It's ideal for when a subject is at your lens's closest focus point. This is landscape mode, and it's best with wide-angle lenses. It provides the deepest depth of field possible that ends with infinity focus, and it will work with the widest setting on your kit zoom lens, whether it's the 28 to 80 or 35 to 80. And the flash should not fire with this mode. Portrait mode uses a large aperture for a shallow depth of field and will auto-fire the flash if needed. Green box. Full auto, you have no control. You can't program shift, all you can do is adjust the film's ISO, maybe. Basically, if you're putting it in green mode, you don't want to think about what's going on. You just want the camera to literally do everything for you. Lock and power off. Program mode. In program mode, the camera selects the shutter speed and aperture. It's ideal for learning how your camera works and for worry-free general shooting. Program shifting is possible. To program shift, you press the shutter button halfway, and then you rotate this dial here on top, the top command dial, to select the shutter speed or aperture that you want in the same way that you would for manual mode. So shutter speed here, and then hold down, I think it's this button here, to adjust the aperture. Yes, that was correct. I guessed that. Nice. And then you can program shift. As soon as you release the shutter button, it erases your program shift, whether or not you have taken a photo. Or if you take a photo, it then resets after the photo's been taken. This program shifting does not work if you're using the flash, either the pop-up or one that is on the camera. TV is shutter priority, stands specifically for time value. Now in TV mode, you set the shutter speed. Here you can see. And the camera, you can see here the shutter speed adjusts as I turn the command wheel. The camera will pick the best aperture for you. This is ideal for sports and action. Aperture value, or aperture priority, is you adjust the aperture value. You can see here on the LCD screen the aperture is changing with the command wheel. So you pick the aperture, the camera will pick the best shutter speed. And this is ideal for general shooting where you want to have creative control over how the images turn out. M is full manual. You are now in charge of everything, right or wrong. So the dial will control the shutter speed right here. And if you see there's a light meter display on the bottom, I'm going to try to get it to a proper exposure. So a proper exposure, that little black box, is underneath that central indicator. If you adjust the shutter speed this way, in full manual mode, it tells you whether you are underexposed or overexposed. The same is true if you adjust the aperture. It will tell you if you are underexposed or overexposed, just like that. So the camera is not going to save you if you have an incorrect exposure. It will do exactly what you tell it to do, and if all of your photos are way over or way under, that is simply because of the way that you had your settings. ADEP is an automatic exposure mode like program. And what it does is it will pick the best shutter speed and aperture with the goal of getting all of your subjects in focus. So let's say you're standing over here, okay? And this is not going to be to scale. You're standing here where the camera is, and you've got a group of friends, right? And they're standing up in front of a beach or a wall or whatever, it doesn't matter. This friend over here is way closer to the lens than this friend over here. So if you just shot this at, say, f2, these friends would be in focus and everyone on the ends would be blurry. ADEP picks an aperture that will get all of your friends to be in focus with your lens and does it automatically. So if you have a group, that's a good setting for group shots. Beeper mode. Beeper mode just, on the beeper setting, you'd use the dial to turn the beeper on or off. Here we go. 1 and 0. Basically, 0, 1 indicates that the beeper will be on, 0 indicates that the beeper will be off. We're going to leave that off because it's kind of annoying. ISO allows you to override the DX code and manually set the ISO if you want. So up to 6400 and down to, wow, down to 6. That's a heck of a range. So this will only, this overrides the DX for pushing and pulling film. And then we have manual rewind. So to rewind the film when you're only halfway through a roll, set it to this setting here and then hold down the rewind button and it will rewind the film all the way into the cassette, I believe, from a partially completed roll. So let's put everything together and talk about how to take a photo with the camera. So basically, in the action modes up through green box in program, what you're going to do is just line up the camera, have it in autofocus for the easiest time, and then take a picture. If you're in program and you want to program shift, all you have to do is hold down the program shift button, which is not that one, which is this one, and you can program shift, as we saw. If you're in shutter priority, just select the shutter speed you want, and the camera will give you an aperture that works, assuming that the lens has an aperture that works. In aperture priority, you just select the aperture you want, and the camera will give you a shutter speed that works. And in both of those modes, you just take a picture, to push the shutter button to take a picture. In manual mode, you select the shutter button or switch over to select the aperture and do that until you get your proper meter reading and take your pictures. And then in ADEP, just like program mode. So that's the process of taking a picture in the different modes. What about double exposures? Ooh, we can do that. Well, yeah, let's do that. So the first thing is double exposures will only work in program, shutter priority, aperture priority, or full manual. And what you do for that is you put it in the mode you want, and then you hold down both of these buttons, and the multiple exposure symbol will appear on the LCD. Now you select how many exposures you want, up to 9. We're just going to go with 2 for a double exposure, like that. Okay. Now that we're going to do 2, we're going to EV compensate here. We want to underexpose one stop. And we will now take our 2 pictures, and multiple exposure will reset. And we are now going to go back to the standard exposure. So after you take your multiple exposure, it will automatically eliminate that setting and advance the film properly, and you can go about shooting. Okay, so I did something that might be confusing to you there. I adjusted the EV compensation to underexpose the image by one stop. And that's because you have your film here, and it's in the back of the camera. And if you expose it properly, then what's going to happen is that if you expose it properly once, it's got a good image on it. If you expose it properly a second time, it's got too much light, and your image, your negative, is going to be what's called, there are 3 terms for it: thick, dense, or dark. They all mean the same thing, which is that the negative, the film, received too much light. If you print it in a darkroom, it will take longer and you'll have reduced contrast. If you digitize it or scan it, it will have increased digital noise and reduced contrast. So it's harder to work. So what you want to do is have a good negative to work off of. And that's why when you're shooting in aperture value, time value, or program mode, you want to exposure value compensate for a double exposure to -1 stop, because you're putting 2 images onto the same piece of film. You need half as much light, and that's -1. I know that seems a little bit confusing, but that's the way it is. In manual mode, you just do it yourself. If your proper exposure is 1/125th at, well, if your proper exposure is a 45th at f8, you either give yourself a shutter speed of 1/90th or an aperture of f11. And that's the science behind taking a double exposure. And that is it. That is everything about the Canon EOS 500. A very cute, very little, very light, but still amply capable little camera. And you know what? I'll tell you what, if you have one of these and you're wondering if it's the best camera ever made, it's not. But you know what? The best camera you can have is the one that's on you. And with as light as this one is, it's really easy to carry around, really easy to shoot with, and it's just not really, it's not going to bother you to have it on you. So those are some really nice things about this camera that, yeah, it's not going to be the highest spec, but it's going to be a camera that you probably want to carry around because it's not going to hurt your back. Thank you for watching this video. Please give me a thumbs up. That lets me know that I'm on the right track producing content which is useful and helpful to you. If you have any questions or comments, please leave those in the comments section below. I'm pretty good about checking these every couple of days and answering questions. If you have any suggestions or ideas for future videos, and if I have the technical know-how and equipment, I'm more than happy to make those. One last thing. Thank you everyone for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. I gotta get up, Steinbeck. I have to turn off the camera.